Now that my content directory has been created and I have all my reference images for the Hannah's Facade loaded in, I'm ready to get started. So let's get down to business by going edit display options here, or D for there's a keyboard shortcut, and under the backdrop I want to load the facade image into the background so I can use it as a guide to model over the top of. Okay, it's important that you do this simply for the fact that you want to try and keep the proportions about right. If you said, well, I could just make it up by looking at the photograph and guessing, unless you've got a really good eye for detail and size and proportions, you're probably going to get it slightly wrong. So it's a good idea to load the reference images into the background and model, so you've got something to model over the top of. It sort of sits in the background and becomes a really useful like blueprint or watermark in the background. Now it's the Bot L window, which is this one here, bottom left, because it's the back view. And under image, I'm going to go load image, Hannah's Facade. I'm going to load this file called hannahsfacade.png. There it is there. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is knock down the contrast for this background so it's a bit more washed out. If it's too bright, then we'll start losing the polygons and the lines, the edges over the top of the background image because it'll be too bright. Okay, so knock the contrast down there, take the brightness, and I knock this right down. What I like to do is I pretty much like to just drag it all the way down until the edge of the brightness slider lines up with that little line in the center of the contrast. So it gives you quite a nice sort of dark balance. Okay, I also need to make the picture a bit more high quality, so I'm going to say 512, like so. And I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to go OK. Now, what this image is basically the digital photograph that's been corrected, or perspective corrected, so it's not so sort of on angle from the digital snapshot. And then I've attempted to draw over the top of it to make sure the lines are nice and clean. So it's sort of like a blueprint drawn over the top of a digital photograph. Let's start working in this viewport. So I'm going to click on the little maximize widget there. Okay, the alternate to clicking on this little blue button in the top corner of the viewport is to hit the 0 key on the numeric keypad section of your keyboard, not the 0 key on the top of the keyboard. The number keys are on the top of the keyboard control these layers up here. So if I go 1, 2, 3, 4, you can see it's changing the layer. 0 is the last one, or layer 10. So it's the 0 key on the numeric keypad. Just important to realize that the 0 key on the keypad is different than the 0 key on the main keyboard. Okay, so with that loaded in the background, how do we get started? Well, the most obvious thing is to get started by drawing the base shape of the actual facade, i.e. the entire wall. It's like a flat stone wall with details cut into it. So to do that, I'm going to create tab, and I'm going to activate the pen tool, and I'm just going to draw around the edges here, like so, using the pen tool. Okay, now this thing at the top is actually sort of like a beveled out extension. It's not actually cut into the shape, so I'm not going to draw around the shape like this, so I'm going to go here instead. Okay, it's pretty easy to add that in a sec. I'll show you how. Okay, down the bottom here, and down the bottom here. Okay, now I've deliberately made some of these points a little bit wonky, just to show you that while the pen tool is activated, notice how the lines, the dots have lines in them, light blue lines. When we see these light blue lines anywhere in Modeler, these are all called drag handles. These are little control points that we can actually click on while they're active like this with a line through. We can click on and we can actually edit them while the pen tool is still active. Okay, so we click and we drag that. Okay, until we're happy with that. So before turning off the pen tool or pushing the return key to what we call drop the tool, make sure that you're happy with the shape. Okay, you may not like some things, maybe that's not in far enough, a little bit better. Okay, so I'm happy with that, and then I'm going to push return key to drop the tool. Okay, I can drop these points here. Okay, that's got me started. Now it's got this little outcrop at the top, so let's take ourselves back out of that single viewport mode. Let's pick the polygon. Okay, so in polygon selection mode down the bottom here, pick the polygon, and under the multiply tab I'm going to select extrude because I want to fatten that wall up. Click and drag back in this right viewport like so. Okay, and again, because we've got this light blue control handle here, we can click on it and we can drag it around until we're happy with stuff. Okay, so it doesn't have to be too thick. It's not a exceedingly thick wall here. Say about this much and push the return key to finish with the extrude tool. Okay, it's looking pretty good. Now, like I said, there's an outcrop on the top here. So I'm going to select this polygon on the top, like so. Then I'm going to use the bevel tool. And now, watch this carefully. I'm not going to bevel it all the way in. I'm going to click and drag the mouse to the left. Okay, I'm just going to bevel it until we've got a nice small ledge running around it, like so. Okay, then I'm going to go to the Modify tab. I'm going to activate the Stretch tool, because if you look carefully, this whole polygon is way wider than this little outcrop here. So I'm going to use the back view here. I'm going to go into the middle here. I'm going to hold down the Control key first, because Control key will let us lock or constrain the tool to the first mouse movement we make. It'll help prevent us sort of sliding the mouse all over the place and making a bit of a mess. So hold down Control, left click or click the mouse and drag to the left. And basically just keep dragging until that polygon lines up to the edges of that outcrop. Okay, once it's there, let's go to multiply again and turn on that bevel tool. If you hold down the Control key and then you click and drag up, and just do that until it comes up to the height of that picture there. And there's our little stone outcrop on the top there. So roughly what it looks like on the actual building itself. Now there are some reference photographs in the Hannah's Facade folder that you can look at. That does have like just the raw digital photo of the facade itself, that you can sort of see there's a bit of a ledge running along here. Okay, so now that's done, drop the bevel tool. Okay, and we've got the basic shape ready to get going. So at this point, probably a good idea to go File, Save Object, and we'll call this Hannah's Facade, and push Return. The next detail I want to build on this facade is like a little awning, it's a little outcrop ledge that runs along the top here. Okay, this shape here. Now you can see there's an outcrop because you can see the shadows that are being cast off it. So I'm going to build this detail next. Now let's go to a new layer, layer 2. Let's bring this viewport up again as a single viewport. Zoom in. Now this picture isn't 100% accurate, as you can sort of see here, because it's been taken off a perspective photograph that's been corrected and fudged around in Photoshop. So there's no way I could get this exactly 100% symmetrical and perfectly flat. So I'm going to do our best guess on this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to draw half the awning, okay, this half shape on this side, using the pen tool again. Okay, and I'm going to follow the lines on the image here. Okay, again, don't worry if you don't get them perfectly right the first time, because you can always come back and adjust these points, because while the pen tool's on, look at these little drag handles on that we can drag around, like so, like so, like so, until we get this about right. Make sure that the thickness looks about the same all the way along. Like you don't want anything that sort of varies. You don't want it to look a bit too thin in one place. So for instance, don't have something that looks like that. It looks wrong. It's nice, even, well, even as you can get, thickness running all the way along this awning. And when you're happy with that, drop the pen tool with the return key. Now, what I want to do is I want to mirror this. I want to take this half and I want to mirror it across to create the other half. If we have a look here, you notice that these points in particular lie on this black line of the x-axis. Okay, this is the x-axis that runs across here. So the x-axis here, where it's where the black line is where x is equal to 0. Now, to make sure we have a nice clean mirror so the points all match perfectly in the center, what I'm going to do is I'm going to unselect all these points. Okay, I can click on a blank area of the toolbar here, either in this info center or in between the buttons. Then we'll select just these 2 points. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to force the points so that their x value both equals 0, so it flattens it out along this black line. They look pretty lined up at the moment, but just to be safe, let's go to the Detail tab, and under Points, click on Set Value. Now the keyboard shortcut for this is V, or V for value. It's an easy way to remember it. You can say X is X, value 0, because we want to make it 0 on this black line, and click OK. Okay, that just guarantees that these both are set with an X value of 0. Okay, unselect those. Now I want to mirror this across this 0 line here, or the center. So to mirror this, I'm going to go Multiply. I'm going to duplicate, go Mirror. And I'm not going to click anywhere in here. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to click on the Numeric button. And what Numeric lets us do is make sure that the axis is set to X. Okay, and make sure the center X value is actually 0. This is where it's going to mirror or duplicate across. So as long as X is 0 and axis is X and merge points is on, merge points will actually combine the points at the center, so it joins these 2 polygons together. Close the numeric panel and just drop the mirror tool once you've done that, and we're finished. So there's our awning. What we can do, okay, we'll just zoom out there, is we can take both of these polygons, we can combine them together, and we can do that under the Detail tab. Under Polygons, Merge Polygons. Now the keyboard shortcut is Shift Z. But by doing that, it combines both the polygons into a single. And we can tell they're joined because there's no line down the middle anymore. Now let's place the building into the background layer. So click the bottom half of the layer button for layer 1. Okay, and there's our building in the background, or a wall. Let's select this polygon and let's go to the Modify, Move tool. Let's just move it so it's at the edge of the building here. Okay. In fact, it doesn't matter if it sits just inside a little, that's pretty good. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go Multiply, Bevel, hold down the Control key first to constrain this tool, and click and drag up until you think it's out far enough. I'm going to say it wouldn't be stuck out too far, perhaps about that far. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. Push the return key to drop the bevel tool. Okay, so here's, if we can put these together, here's how Facade is looking at the moment. It's not too bad, it's pretty close to getting us sort of started in this area. So the last thing I want to do here, well, the next thing I should say I want to do here, and this is the last thing, is I want to generate this cute little, if we zoom in here, sort of cute little edging that runs across the top here. Okay, so let's go through and let's select the polygons that run along the top of that awning section, like that. Okay, we don't need that other layer there. Let's click on number 2. And what I'm going to do to make this little edging is I'm going to use a tool called Multi-Shift. And Multi-Shift is like bevel, but for multiple polygons all at the same time. So I'll zoom into this just to have a nice close look at it. Okay, Multi-Shift is turned on. Let's go in for numeric on this, because sometimes it's nice to see the numeric settings. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say inset amount. That's how far shifted out. We want to sort of create a little ledge that pokes out. So I'm going to say inset amount. Make a negative inset, negative 4 millimeters. You can sort of see, if you look, it's got this little nice ledge that sticks out. Okay, that's 1. So that's got it started. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click insert shift. What that'll do is make a new multi-shift. It's called multi-shift because you can do multiple shifts at the same time. Okay. Now with that in place, I'm going to say shift amount, and I'm going to click and drag the mini slider up. I'll make about 9 millimeters. Okay, that's looking pretty good. So it goes out and then it goes up. See this nice little ledge that runs at the edge there. Okay, now there was a bit of an angle thing happening here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go insert shift again to make a new one. And I'm going to go insert amount. In fact, a shift amount. I'm going to shift it up to about 15 millimeters. Now notice that these aren't the actual the displacements. These are the actual continuous movement. So 15 millimeters is as it was starting from the very beginning, the first shift. So it's not like we're moving 15 millimeters for this one little shift. Okay, so a little thing to get your head around there, because bevel, every time I make a new bevel, it goes how far out, how far up. With multi-shift, it's continuously adding up, saying, so now how much further should I go? Well, we were 9 millimeters, we now moved to 15 millimeters. Inset amount, it says -4, let's drag that back. So about -8. Okay, do another insert shift. And then I say shift amount. And just do up to 20 millimeters. So that's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. That's giving me my little ledge detail that I was after. Okay, once you're happy with that, you can drop the multi-shift tool. Now I want to just show you a few things with the multi-shift tool that are quite cool. Okay, we've made 3 shifts by inserting them. The nice thing about multi-shift is if we didn't like something, we can go through each shift and we can actually interactively edit them again. Okay, and as we go through, remember that anything that's light blue in the viewport and modeler tends to be what we call a control handle, means we can edit it. So when we go next shift and previous shift, you see that light blue control handle moving up and down, showing you which shift we'll be editing if we go and tweak things in here. Okay, so I'm not going to do anything for now. That's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm going to drop the multi-shift tool, unselect those polys, and I'm done for this part of the awning. That's looking pretty cool. I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, at this point it's probably a good idea to go File, Save Incremental, just to save this object in case something bad happens, like the computer crashes or the power cuts. And we can have another look at our wonderful little new model. It's looking pretty good. Okay, so we've got to this stage. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to build all those little blocks that sit along the bottom here. So join me in the next video and we'll continue. Let's create the small blocks that decorate underneath this little outcropping awning. So to do that, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to activate Create Box tool. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the bottom of the first flat section awning. I'm going to drag out a thin box. Okay, like so. Okay, I'm going to go to numeric, and I'm going to say, well, I need lots of little boxes here, not just one long rectangular box. So I'm going to go in here and say, under the numeric tool for the box, I'm going to go to segments X, and I'm just going to crank up the number of segments, which is going to split that box into lots of smaller polygons. Okay, maybe 40, no, maybe a few less than that. Let's make it 35. Okay, so I stretch it out to fit this gap here, and I'll say, there we go. So make 35 smaller polygons out of this. We'll select all these. Now I use the B for bevel tool. I'm going to zoom in quite close because what I want to do is I want to separate these boxes up so they're not all one unit like that. Hold down the control key and click and drag to the left, like so, just to inset them like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and I'm push the minus key on the keyboard. Minus, you can find this under view. It's hide selected. I'm just going to hide those polygons. Once those are hidden, notice that I'm in a new layer, of course. I'm going to delete those polygons that are left behind, and then I'm going to unhide to bring these ones back. And there's a whole pile of individual boxes, pretty much ready to be turned into something a little bit more than just flat boxes. So let me put these two layers together and putting this in the background. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to F for flip. Notice the polygon is facing inside. It's facing towards the wall. I want it facing the other way. So push the F key to flip the polygon. Can move it up so it cuts just into the awning a bit. Then I'm going to use the multiply bevel tool, click and drag up. Okay, and push the return key to drop the bevel tool. And there's my first set of small boxes. Simple as that. Okay, so that's started it. Now to do the rest of the wall, what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy all these boxes. So I'm going to select all the boxes, all the polygons, go edit. So I'm going to edit, and I'm going to go copy or Control C. This will copy it into memory. Okay, and then I unselect these. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to paste two more copies, one here and one here. Now I'm not going to just go Control V or paste. What I'm going to do instead is under edit, use this tool called the paste tool. Now this is two pastes in Lightwave. One's called paste and one's called paste tool. Now paste will just paste those polygons back over the top of these, which will make them impossible to choose, because, well, you know, if we paste things on top of each other and then we try and pick them, it's going to be really hard to get them. So I'm going to use a paste tool. What paste tool does is it pastes and then lets you move them around with a mouse key. Okay, if I apple click or right click, I can do another paste like so, and there's my two extra pasted sets of blocks. Now for this one here, notice it has to be on an angle, so I'm going to select all these polygons and use modify, rotate, and I'm just going to rotate them into place. Obviously there's too many of them, so I'm going to go to the center like that, use the right square bracket to make sure you select all these polygons and push the delete key, and that gets rid of those extra ones. Same in here. Okay, don't want these. In fact, we want these ones. Like so. Square bracket to make sure you've got the polygons selected, and delete those polygons. Okay. Now just go in and make sure that these are actually lining up with the bottom of our awning. Like so. The same with these top ones here, make sure these are actually lining up nicely. They look pretty good to me. I can add a few vertically because of course they're not just across the horizontals there. So I'm going to just lasso a few of these. Okay, select them. I'm going to go edit, copy. Then we use the paste tool, edit, paste tool. I'm just going to paste them here for now. Push return to drop that paste tool. Okay, we'll take them. Okay, and I want to rotate them vertically 90 degrees. So a keyboard shortcut, we could either use the modify rotate tool, go in the center, click and drag to spin it around. But I want it perfectly 90 degrees. So a handy little keyboard shortcut is to move the mouse into the center where you want to rotate. Push the R key, R for rotate, which will rotate a 90 degree, perfect 90 degree sort of angle for you. Then we go move, and let's move them in place. Just make sure that they're nice and flush with the stone. Okay, even if they cut in a little bit, that's always good. Okay, then we'll get rid of these extra ones that are cutting through each other, and we'll delete them. Okay, we can take these, T for move, and move them up so that they do that. Man, it's looking pretty good. Okay, we need some more of those up in here, so I can probably select these four. Okay, we'll get edit copy, edit paste tool, then I'll click and drop them in here and push return to drop the paste tool. Let's zoom into those, and again we don't need as many here because of the angle, so T for move, move them so they're flush against the stonework like so. And we can probably delete this bottom one because it's not really needed. Okay, and we're pretty much done. So we've copied that. All we need to do now is do it to the other side. So again, like we did with the awning, we'll take those, we'll use the mirror tool, multiply, mirror, go to the numeric options, perfect, and drop the tool, and we're done. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Okay, and that's finished the awning section for our facade here. So pretty good idea at this point. Go File, Save Incremental to save a new version. The next detail I want to tackle on the facade will be this inset, this sort of inset area at the bottom of the facade. And here's like it's inset back into the stone, and we've got 6 pillars that separate 3 pretty little ornate tiles here. So to do that, the first thing I need to do is I need to actually cut an inset into the actual wall itself. I can do that by using a tool called Speed Boolean. And what a Boolean is, it basically lets us take 2 different pieces of geometry, such as a box and the wall, and lets us do things like subtract the box from the wall, so it cuts it into the wall. Let's see how we do that. So make sure you've got the first layer selected, and I'm going to go create box, and I'm going to create a box so that represents this area that I'm going to cut in. And you notice the first thing, as soon as we create this box, it's still got 35 segments along the x-axis. This is the number of segments that we set up when we're making those little boxes that detail up under the awning here. So what we need to do is go numeric options and turn your segments back to 1. Okay, so we've got just a single box like that. Okay, and let's drag the box out. Make sure that it sits back as deep as you want this inset to go into the wall, like that. And push the return key to drop the box tool. Now what we need to do is, before we can subtract this from this, we need to select the box. We say this is the box that we're going to Boolean subtract from that wall. So I'm selecting all the polygons on the box. Now you can select a few and then push the right square bracket, which will select all the other polygons in that box. And then under the construct menu, I've got under the combine section here, you see I've got a Boolean tool here, but it's grayed out. That's because this is the old Boolean tool that ships with Lightwave. What this used to need to work was basically the box and a background layer. So it'd have 2 layers, box in one layer, the wall in this layer, and then we'd run it. Instead, in Lightwave 9, we have these things called speed booleans that let us have the box and the wall in the same layer. All we have to do is make sure we select the one we want to subtract or remove from the other one, and then click speed boolean. And we can do we can do a whole pile of things here. We can do a few things here. We can union, subtract, intersect, or add. The one we want here is subtract, which will remove or cut this box away from the wall. So I'm click subtract, and there it is. Now I'm going to undo that, just so I can show you another tool in here. Underneath Speed Boolean, we have little one-click versions of all those options: Speed Boolean add, Speed Boolean intersect, subtract, and union. So rather than clicking here and bringing up a menu and then we have to select one of these buttons, if we want just a quick and dirty Boolean operation that we don't have to click, click, click to get to it. We can select the box and then just click SP bool subtract, stands for speed Boolean subtract, and it'll just do it. Okay, now we're going to have facade, I should say our inset cut into our facade. What we're going to do is going to make sure that it's actually connected together, because what Booleans have a tendency to do, and we can find out very quickly by selecting polygon inside here and then pushing the right square bracket key on the keyboard to select the connected polygons, is that it only goes to the edges here, then it doesn't go any further, because these corners on the main wall and this inset aren't actually physically connected together. So we need to connect the points at all these corners together. To do that, unselect the polygons, and under Detail, activate the Merge Points tool. What Merge Points will do is to look for points that sit in exactly the same place. So for instance, this inset has 4 points at the corners here, and this wall has 4 points at the corners here. And it'll take ones that are in exactly the same place, and it'll combine them together, or basically attach them together. So we say Automatic and click OK. It should say 4 points eliminated. When you think about it, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. Perfect. Okay. So our inset's cut in. Okay, it's not looking too bad. Let's do a file, save incremental, just to save that. The next detail I want to add to the facade is going to be these 3 square tiles that we have here. These are sort of carved into the rock or into the stone that this facade's made from. They sort of like cut in, they've got grooves and they've got little ledges that poke out, and they're quite ornate. So I want to actually cut these physically into the model. I'm going to cut these into this particular polygon. Okay, and to do that I'm going to use another tool that we can find on Construct. It's not a speed Boolean, but what it is a thing called Drill. And what Drill does is it lets us put shapes in a background layer. In fact, let's go to layer 4, and okay, I'm going to move into this viewport, bring it up as a full screen. I'm going to make another box, and I'm going to say, okay, box starts at the corner of this tile and ends at the corner of this tile. Just adjust it a bit. Okay, got it so the sits nice and center like that. Okay, pretty happy with that. And push return. Okay, and then I'm going to go multiply. Under subdivide, I'm going to activate the knife tool, or Shift K. It's a keyboard shortcut for that. Hold down the Control key and put the mouse pointer sort of above this line on the edge of this tile. Hold down the Control key and click and drag. And drag it all the way from one side of the polygon to the other. What knife does is does a nice straight cut through polygons. Okay, if we want to repeat the knife tool, we can use the right click or Apple click to click again, and it'll make a new cut with the knife tool. Then we can left click, okay, to move it around if we want to. Okay, put it in place, go to where we want to make another cut, and then right click, like that, like so. Okay, and lastly, on the edge of this one, right click once more, or Apple click, and make sure it's lined up. It looks pretty good to me. Okay, and push return to drop the knife tool. Now that we've cut these 3 tiles in, make sure I'm in polygon selection mode. Let's just delete these 2 polygons by selecting them and pushing the delete key on the keyboard. Okay, let's leaving the 1, 2, 3 squares here that we need to represent the tiles that we've got here. Okay, so I've done this in a layer on its own. What I'm going to do is I'm going to place layer 1 in the foreground now and put layer 4 in the background. Okay, so it looks something like that. And I'm going to select the inset polygon like so. Now for this I'm going to use under Construct a tool called the Drill tool. We'll click that. It's called the template drill, and what it essentially does is it takes the polygons in the background layer and it treats them like, imagine sort of like a drill bit, which is like a long cylindrical sort of cutting tool. Well, it's going to take these 3 polygons. Imagine stretching those as long square cutting tools, like cookie cutters in a way. Okay, I want to cut it through this way. Okay, so this axis, as we can see here, is Z. So I'm going to say axis is Z, and I want to just slice these into the polygons. I don't want to actually delete them like we did with the Boolean tool. So I'm going to use a tool called slice, or an operation called slice, and click OK. And what that does, if you saw that, is it basically takes these 3 shapes and sort of slices them into the polygon for us. Okay, there you go. 1, 2, 3. Now that these are in place, I can use the bevel tool to basically inset and drag back and create the detail I need to create the 3 ornate panels here. Now it's a bit hard to see the ornate panel design in this particular image, so I'm going to get image editor, load, and I'm going to say, let's have a look, Hannah's street photo maybe. This is the original photograph that I took of the building. Okay, you see it sort of bevels in, and then out, and then in, then out, is then in, and there's a wide one, then out again. Okay, and they're sort of identical, same insets and outcrops in there. So while we can't see it very clearly in this image here, let's go low. Let's load Hannah's image. Now Hannah's image is the same as the facade image, but it doesn't have the lines drawn on it. It's like the full color version, like that. And we can sort of see the detail a bit easier with this image. Okay. Now with that image loaded, I'm going to go D for display, and I'm going to say backdrop, bot L, and just swap it for Hannah's image. There it is there. Okay, I'm probably going to brighten that up just a little, contrast up just a little, just so I can see it a bit clearer. And there we go. I get a good idea. You can sort of see there's a bit of a groove here. So let's go to the multiply tool, activate bevel. Okay, and I need to see this one because they're all identical. I need to see the other sort of views like this so I can see how far to sink it back into the wall here, into the inset. With the bevel tool activated, I'm going to click and drag down just to bring that back. Okay. Now if you have a bit of a problem controlling the mouse, and you this sort of funky thing happening, then you can use the numeric options, or you could hold down the control key to constrain the tool, or lock it so that if I hold down control first and then I click and drag, doesn't matter if I go left and right, it doesn't go crazy. It locks it into the first mouse move I make. So I'm going to move it down, and okay, I'm going to right click or Apple click to make a new bevel, like so. Now hold down the control key and I'm going to drag left, which will just bring it inwards, like so. I'm going to right click again to make a new bevel, drag it up. Okay, now we've made this nice groove, sort of the same as we have in here. Okay, I'm going to right click again to make another bevel. I'm going to click and drag to the left to do that. Okay, I'm going to right click, another bevel, click and drag down just to inset it. Okay, you can sort of see there's like a tiny little edge here, so let's right click again, click and drag to the left. Again, just using this picture as a guide, right click to make a new bevel, click and drag up, right click, click and drag to the left. Okay, right click, click and drag down. Okay, so there's a nice little edge thing happening. Okay, right click, click and drag to the left. Okay, insets like that. Right click again, click and drag up. Right click, click and drag in. Okay, right click, click and drag back, and we're done. So this is roughly the same as the moldings on the actual wall. Okay, you notice because we've had all 3 polygons selected, it's done the same for all 3 panels, which should be pretty accurate. as far as I'm concerned. And I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm going to push return key to drop the bevel tool. And let's unselect these polygons. And that's added that nice ornate detail into the inset there. Okay, I'm going to go File, Save, Object, just to save that. Now that I have the panels inset and all the detail cut in, it looks pretty good. What I want to do now is I want to make this other detail that sits on top. It's like a strange wheel type shape. Okay, so there's 3 of them and they're all identical, so I need to make one of these and duplicate them across each of these panels. So I'm going to find an empty layer. In fact, I'm going to get a layer 4 where these 3 polygons are. I don't need these polygons anymore. They've served their purpose for cutting those panels in, so I can delete these safely. Okay, and I'm going to just let's zoom into one of these circular things. Find one that's easy to see the detail. It looks like it's a bit of a wheel type shape. So the rim goes in and it sinks in. It looks sort of like quite round here, and it's got like a funny little center hub piece that looks like it's got a bit of a ridge running around it. So to do this, I'm going to use Create Disk tool, because disk after all is a circular shape. Move the mouse into the center, click and drag in this viewport until you get a circle that's roughly the right shape. Keep your eye on the information panel at the bottom of the toolbar, because that will tell you the width, height and depth of this disk as we make it. You want to keep the width and the height the same so it is perfectly circular. If they're slightly off like this, you know, with this weird oval shape, and you can see at the very bottom of the toolbar there it says width 150mm, height 120mm, that's not circular, that's weird oval. So you want to drag these around till they're roughly about 120mm each way. Okay, in the side view here we want to just drag this out to thicken it so it becomes like a little cylinder, and drop the disk tool. I'm going to put this first layer in the background. Okay, select that. I'm going to move it back so it sits roughly in the right place against this panel here. Okay, it's looking pretty good. Pretty happy with that. Let's unselect all these polygons. Select the polygon on the front, and what we're going to do is use a bevel tool a number of times to just mold this sort of detail into it. So multiply, bevel. Start by clicking and dragging up just a little. And then I'm going to right click to make a new bevel. Click up and in a tiny bit to the left. Right click, drag to the left to bring it in. Right click to make another bevel. Click to the left and click down to just add that nice edge around there. Then right click again to make another bevel. Click and drag down. Now remember, you can hold the control key to constrain the mouse movement each time you do one of these, just to help prevent that crazy freaky mouse control problem that some people tend to have when they start working in 3D. Okay, so control key first before you click will lock the mouse movement or the tool to work on the first mouse movement. Okay, I'm going to now right click to make another bevel. I'm going to click and drag to the left to bring it inwards, like so, and click and drag up. Okay, click and drag to the right a little to knock it back out if we want to. Okay, I'm going to now right click to make yet another bevel. Notice that we're just using bevel the whole time to create this amount of detail that we want. And I'm going to click and drag to the left. Okay, I'm going to right click to make another bevel. I'm going to click and drag down to sink it in just a little. And then I'm going to right click again and click and drag to the left to insert and drag up just a bit to poke this out. Drag to the left a bit just to bring it in like that. Okay, I'm going to right click one more time and then click and drag to the left to bring it in a little further. Okay, if I zoom into this, I'm going to click and drag up just a tiny bit just to round the top off. Okay, if we look in the perspective view, so it does this sort of thing. Okay, and then I'm going to drop the bevel tool. And we'll look at that. That's looking not too bad. It's not fantastic. Okay, you can use more bevels if you want to round this a bit better. Okay. Okay, now if you wanted to round this just a little more, because at the moment, if you look at this, it's not exactly round, it's more sort of on a sharp curve. What we can do is we can select these polygons, like so, and we can go multiply, use this tool called Bandsaw Pro. Okay, and when you activate it, it'll probably go around and select everything. You notice that there's this extra tiny little cut that runs down here. It's because the last time I used Bandsaw Pro, I was set it to cut right along an edge. So with Bandsaw Pro still active, go numeric. That's why, because our cut for the bandsaw is saying cut the polygons at 5% in from the edge here. So I'm going to click the clear button, which will reset it to the middle. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. And I'm going to drop the Bandsaw Pro tool. What Bandsaw Pro does is it goes around and it follows what we call a loop of polygons. It looks at polygons that join together on the sides or follow a path, such as these. They follow each other around in a circle. Selects them, and then we'll actually slice through them for you. It's sort of like a knife tool that doesn't cut in straight lines. It sort of cuts along a path of polygons. Okay, so I'm going to switch to point selection mode. And the nice thing about the Bandsaw Pro tool is it leaves the points selected for the new cut that it just made in our polygons. If we zoom into this, okay, we'll come up here and look. Here's the shape. If we use the Move tool under Modify, Move, and we move the points upwards, just a little, don't need them a lot, a bit like that, we sort of create a more rounded appearance for our disc here, or for this inner part here. And that sort of feels a little bit better. Only thing now is I'd say this sort of inside section feels like it's a bit too deep or a bit too far back. So I'm going to go to polygon selection mode, unselect everything. I'm going to select the center polygon. And I'll select all the polygons out to the edge here, so I can move this whole section forward. To do this, under View Selection, we've got this, where are we, Expand option. What Expand does is it says select all the polygons that are connected to the edges of the currently selected polygons. Okay, this is the Shift right square bracket key is a keyboard shortcut for this. So if we hold down Shift, tap the right square bracket, and keep tapping it, it'll just keep selecting the next sort of loop of polygons outwards. And we'll just keep going and going till it gets to the edge there. Once it's selected, we'll go back to Modify, Move, and we'll just move it forward so it's not so deep inside here, like so. That feels a little bit better. I'm quite happy with that. And push return. Okay, so there's one. Now to do the other side, obviously I could just use the mirror tool. So multiply, duplicate mirror, and go to the numeric options. Make sure it's on X and center on X is 0. We can turn off merge points for now because we don't really want to combine extra points. And there's the other one on the other side. Drop the mirror tool. Lastly, let's select one of these. And let's go Edit, Copy, then go Edit, Paste tool. And click in the middle here somewhere. And the Paste tool lets us basically paste it wherever we click the mouse. Okay. You notice that it doesn't quite line up with these other ones. So after I've pasted it, I'm going to go in and use Modify, Move, and using the side view, I'm going to bring it out to line up and bring it down to line up. So it's pretty close. And I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, what I can now do is I can probably go, and let's start naming some of these polygons, because at the moment we haven't been naming polygons. Now the stone we probably want nice and sharp, but these we probably want nice and smooth, because they are after all quite smooth and sort of sculpted, so they're sort of round. So I'm going to go Q on the keyboard or click on surface button down here, keyboard shortcut Q. Let's just give names to the polygons. So this polygon I'm going to call facade underscore smooth. And I'm going to leave all these. I'm going to switch off make default for now and click on smoothing and go OK. And that instantly looks a lot better. Look at that. Now it looks a lot more like the sculpture. Okay, these other pieces, let's select these 3 layers. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Let's go Q. And let's call this... Now these aren't smooth, these are quite square and rocky, or square and blocky I should say. Let's call this facade flat. Like so. Turn off smoothing. Okay. Okay, that's looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. Okay. Now don't forget to go File and go Save Incremental. So let's save this object for now. Okay, and join me in the next video. We'll continue. We'll build some pillars and we'll get these pillars in here and finish this inset area off. Let's continue with the inset detail on the facade here. I'm going to zoom in here a bit because there's something, yeah, I thought so. Something I'm not quite happy with. And that is the fact that the facade, the inset, and the actual picture of the facade don't quite match. You can sort of see the top in my CG version doesn't quite match the top in the actual real photograph. The same goes for the sides. They're a bit further out than they should be, and the bottom's just a tiny bit off. Now to edit these, I'm just going to simply select them and move them a bit. So I'm going to start with the top polygon here. I'm in polygon selection mode. You notice as soon as I click, oops, if I click and try to select that top polygon, I'm going to pick all these other polygons. And you can sort of see on this other viewport over here, I've gone and selected this polygon, the polygon I want, and also this polygon. So one way of unselecting those polygons would be to come back in here, let go of the mouse button, click again, and drag back over the top of the ones we don't want, just leaving the one selected one behind. Now the other way of selecting them is just by using a different viewport than this one, such as this, because you can see if I click here I select it, but I also select these side ones. However, if I right click or Apple click and I lasso around it in this viewport, it's much easier to choose. Okay, now I've got the polygon selected. I'm going to move it up. So I'm going to full screen this viewport and zoom in so I can be fairly accurate. The first thing you might do is you might go, well, let me go here and select the move tool and then click and drag. If you want a bit more control over this, if you actually use the Alt or the Option key on a Mac, hold it down. Okay, you don't need to select the move tool for this. And let's use the up arrow. So with the Alt key or the Option key held, tap the up arrow while you're in this viewport. We'll move the polygon up, like so. 3 taps, it's fixed. That was pretty easy. Okay. So we fixed that pretty quickly. Now let's select the side polygon here. We can do it in the front view, is the easiest way because we can just right click or Apple click and lasso around it, like so. Keep the mouse in this viewport because we're going to use the Alt and tap the arrow key thing again. Now one thing that you've got to realize is the arrow keys work within whatever viewport the mouse cursor is in. Don't put your mouse over in this viewport and then tap left or right, because it'll actually move it this way in the viewport, not this way as we'd expected. So in this viewport, let's hold down the Alt or the Option key and tap the right arrow key. 1, 2, 3, I think we'll do it. That's pretty good. Let's unselect the polygon. Okay. Pan across. Like so. Okay, let's select this polygon, hold down the Alt or the Option key, tap the left arrow 3 times. Perfect. Lastly, let's pick this bottom polygon. As you can see, it's slightly off. It should probably be about here. I'm going to select it in this viewport because it's a lot easier to pick it here than it is to pick it here. Okay, keep the mouse back into this viewport, hold down Option or Alt and tap the up arrow key. Just twice will do, and we're done. and that's much more accurate. Make sure to go File, Save Incremental. To finish up the inset detail inside our facade here, all we need is some pillars. Now, lucky for us, all these 6 pillars that are down here happen to be identical, so we really just need to model one nice looking pillar and then duplicate it across to finish things up here. So let's get started. Let's go to a new layer and let's go to Image Editor and go Load. Under here I'm going to load an image called Hannah's Pillar. And what Hannah's Pillar is, it's a nice clean reference image of just the pillar that we can work with. Okay, so let's go D for display, backdrop, and let's place it, well, I want to keep this picture in here for now. Let's place it as a background reference in this viewport instead. And let's say Hannah's Pillar. Okay, make sure that the brightness and contrast are adjusted and set the image resolution to 256 and click OK. Now don't worry too much about the scale, because you'll see that it's actually the same height as our Hannah's backdrop. Okay, if you are concerned that you'd rather be modeling this pillar to match the exact scale of a real pillar rather than modeling a big one and then stretching it down and fitting it in, then what you can do is this. Go Create Box. Okay, here's a pillar. Let's draw around one of these pillars here. Now make it a little wider. I'll tell you why. It's because you notice that this reference image of the pillar has a bit of an edge to it. Okay, there are 2 things you could do in this case. You could get a Photoshop and crop that. Me, I'm going to just model a box that slightly wider and sort of roughly represents the dimensions of what that picture should be. Okay, and before I finish with the box tool, I'm going to go to the numeric options, and I want it this deep as well. So I'm going to say depth is 135 millimeters, 135 mm. So it's a nice shaped box. This is roughly what the size of one of these pillars should be. And I'm going to drop the box tool. And this will give me my dimensions of a typical pillar. So all I need to do is resize this picture to match this box size. To do that, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to push F2. What F2 will do is it'll auto center the box, because I want to model around the origin, or these black center lines, and I'll explain why later, because I'm going to use this like we had in the mirror tool to create the pillar. So I'm going to draw part of a pillar and then create it, but I need to use the center point to make creating the pillar a lot easier. Okay, so here's the box. I'm going to go D for display options, backdrop, bottom right, because that's where the pillar image is, and when we have geometry inside the viewport, there's this option automatic size that pops up that we can click on, and what it does is it automatically shrinks or resizes this background image to match the geometry. Okay, so now if we zoom out, our reference image of our pillar now sort of roughly matches a real pillar size, so we can model to scale now, so we won't have to get too clever with resizing and stretching and moving things around. Okay, so let's get rid of the box, because we don't need this box here anymore, and go delete. I'm going to zoom in to the pillar image. Okay, let's bring this viewport up to full screen. Okay, there we go. Now, what I'm going to do to model this pillar is I'm going to use the Create tab, Pen tool, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw half of this pillar. Then I'm going to use a tool under Multiply called Lathe, which is here, that will actually spin or revolve that half a pillar around to create the entire 3D pillar. Now don't worry too much right now. You think, oh, what's he talking about? Because it'll be clear in a second. So let's start by drawing half a pillar. I'm going to click, let's start in the middle here, click at the top and click at the bottom, down the center line here. Okay, probably zoom in a little so we can get a nice close-up look. So we're going to model the right amount of detail in here. Go to the edge, like so. Okay, like so. With a pen tool, you don't have to be too precise, because you can always come back and edit things. Comes up to about here, nice and straight. If we zoom in close, you can sort of see that this pillar, it's got like a square block at the bottom, then it's got this rounded area here that sits just on top of it. So I'm going to model a little bit of a groove in here where the top of the block would be, and then a little bit up, and I'm going to model a simple box where it's round. I'm going to make a simple box shape like that. I'm not going to model the roundness here because I'm going to use another tool to do that. Okay, so going to go into about here. Okay, it's a little hard to see because the detail of this pillar image isn't super high res, so we're going to do a bit of guesstimating here. I'm going to say it goes up here and into here. Okay, something like that. Okay, let's pan up the viewport here. Okay, we'll click. Okay, this is in shadow under here, but what if we go up a bit further, you notice that there's another one of these rounded sections here. If I go up to more, say about there, again I'm going to draw a box like so, and we can sort of see here same sort of thing. Now it looks like these might do that, but this is actually the perspective of that photograph, because remember that photograph isn't taken flat on. So if we look carefully, it's sort of, this is sort of this rounded area that sort of goes backwards towards the back of the pillar. So don't be fooled to think that this is sort of curved. It's quite a chunky sort of pillar design. Goes up like so. Okay. Now if you're doing your own facade, you might want to take some higher res photographs of details like this so you can be perfectly accurate. For now, okay, that's not too bad. So I'm pretty happy with that. Just going to double check by panning down. Everything looks pretty good there too. I'm pretty happy. Maybe this could go out just a little bit further. So we can click on the points with the pen tool active. That's better. I'm happier with that. And then I'm going to drop the pen tool with the return key. And there it is. Now what I need to do, let's go to points mode and let's deselect all the points. You can either use the question mark key on the keyboard or just click on an empty area in the toolbar or along the bottom here. And I'm going to select these center 2 points, the ones that sit down the center line here. Now we look at the letters at the side here. We see this axis here is Z, so we want to make sure that these lie flush down a perfect center here. To do that, we go to detail, and we did this when we mirrored that awning. And I'm going to go set value, or V for value on the keyboard. I'm going to say it's the Z axis this time because we've seen it here, and it should be 0. Click OK just to ensure those 2 points are perfectly centered. Now we've done that, let's deselect those and let's make the rest of the pillar. So let's just zoom out for now so we can sort of see what's happening. Okay, there it is. Let's go to the multiply tab and let's activate the lathe tool. And I'm not going to click anything, I'm going to actually activate numeric options. What lathe does is it takes that half shape and it revolves it or lathes it around in a circular fashion to create something like that. Now that's pretty cool, but we know our pillars aren't round, so we need to change the number of sides for the lathe tool to 4. And there's our pillar. Let's push the return key until the numeric panel goes blank, which means we've dropped the lathe tool. I'm going to turn on texture Y here so I can see the wireframes. So here's our nice looking pillar. One thing you'll notice, however, looking front on, if we put these other ones in the background, is that when we've lathed that, or we've modeled it in the side view, we've created a pillar that's sort of twisted 90 degrees this way, so the edge is here rather than flat on. So we need to rotate this back so it's front on to the actual facade itself. To do that, okay, we use the top view here, and under modify, rotate, if you hold down the control key to constrain, what constrain does with the rotate tool is that it constrains it to increments of 15 degrees at a time. Now we sort of need to rotate it. In fact, it's not 90 degrees, it's only 45 degrees. So it needs to rotate about 45 degrees this way. So place the mouse cursor in the center of the pillar in this top view, like so. Hold down the control key first. Click and drag to the right. And it'll rotate in increments of 15 degrees at a time. Now 45 degrees divided by 15 is 3, so drag it to the right. 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Now it's lined up. And drop the rotate tool. Okay. Now that we've got that done, we'll notice that okay, well, these round things aren't round anymore. And also the scale looks a little off in terms of how it lines up with this image itself. It's because when we modeled sort of diagonally this way. So I'm going to use the stretch tool to stretch it. I'm going to move to the center of this right viewport here. Hold down control and drag it to the right. Stretch it out. That's 136%. A little bit further. 100. Let's say 140% this way. In this view, if I hold down control, now you're probably wondering, how did I know 140%? Well, I'm looking at the bottom area, or the, what we call quick info area of the toolbar here in Modeler. So as I move the cursor in place, you notice it tells you the position of the cursor. Make sure X is at 0, hold down control, click, and drag to the right. And we'll just stretch out. That top value should read 140%, which now makes it about the right proportions. Okay. The last thing I want to do here with this particular pillar is I want to just round these shapes, because you notice that they're still square and chunky, and the actual pillar really is nice and smooth. So let's start by going and rounding this bottom part. So let's zoom in a little. Let's say, okay, well, I need to round the top here. So if I select go edge selection mode, select this top edge. In fact, we only have to select 2 of these edges and go select loop to select right round. And I'm going to go to multiply rounder, which will round the top for me. I'm going to say numeric options for rounder. Okay, if it does some really weird, crazy things, it's because the inset distance is probably too big. So let's click on inset distance and drag it back. Okay. Now we're going to have to do the bottom half of this as well. So we need it about halfway down, like that. In fact, I'm going to say about 2 millimeters. Looks pretty good to me. Okay, rounding polygons, don't make this too high. Okay, you don't need a huge amount in here. It'll just be make the model too complex. So leave it at something like 4, and drop the rounder tool. Okay, and then let's deselect all the edges. Okay, let's do the same for the bottom half of that section. This edge, this edge. Okay, selected one edge too many. What have we got? Inside one. There we go. Don't need that one. And of course we go close numeric for a sec. We go select loop. So it selects right round. Rounder. Oops, sorry. Click the right button. Rounder. Numeric. And we can just use the same settings. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. Doesn't matter if it's a bit square there on the edge. And push return. Okay, if you want to get picky, you could go back and you could redo that. Make it maybe 3 millimeters so it becomes more circular. I quite like that sort of slightly round at the top and bottom, little square on the sides. Something a bit nicer like that. We can do the same, the top half here. So let's first do this one. And again, like we did with the bottom, edge, edge, select loop, rounder, hit the N key for numeric to activate the numeric options. You notice by default it doesn't activate. Now let's say about 3 millimeters for this one. A little bit bigger because this is a bigger area. And push return to drop rounder tool. Let's close the numeric panel for now. Let's have a look at the bottom half. This one and this one. Select loop, rounder, in for numeric, and again we can use those numeric settings. Push return to drop the rounder tool. Okay. Lastly, let's round the top. Now the top, you can sort of see it is quite flat anyway, so this is probably not as inaccurate as you might think, or you haven't rounded it right to the center. If you're really picky, or you really want to, do feel free to go back and play around with rounder until you've got the roundness you're after. Okay, let's start with the bottom half this time on the top one. Two edges, select loop, and go rounder. N for numeric to activate it. Let's drag that out a bit further because it's definitely going to be a lot more than 3. I want to make it 5 millimeters. Okay, return to drop the rounder tool. Top half, and we're almost finished. Rounder, N for numeric. Okay, this one almost goes to center. I'm pretty happy with this. Okay, notice that something doesn't quite work here. It's doing something weird on this edge. I'm not quite sure why. So let's deselect that. Push return to drop that rounder tool. Now we don't want. Let's double check what's happening here. Make sure there's nothing weird going on. Okay, there's one edge. Sometimes if we've got some strange points or polygons in here. Okay, that's very odd that it's done something strange on that one. So I'm going to try this again. This one and this one. Select loop. Rounder. N for numeric. Okay. Something just a bit odd happened there. I'm not quite sure what happened. But we ran it again. And it looks okay now. Okay, that's pretty good. I like that. Oops. Okay, drop the rounder tool. And we're done. So we've got the nice smooth roundness in here. Square chunky sort of pillar with round detail. The last thing we need to do, of course, is just position them up and put them in place. So let's do that before we finish. Let's T, select it, T, move it in place. That's pretty good. It's pretty close. Say about there. And of course it's got to actually be within the actual inset, so make sure your inset's actually sitting in a background layer. I should say the first layer is in the background. And just let's use the Alt key and the arrow key and tap it. Keep zooming in if you don't think the precision's right. There we go. See that? I want this sort of lined up flush. And we'll just check the side view here. Okay. Nope, it's a little far in. There we go. This line should be lined up flush with this line. Okay, so Alt in this viewport. Tap the left mouse button. And maybe just move it up a little. Till it lines up like that. And I'll say that looks pretty good to me. I'm pretty happy with that. Okay. Feels like that pillar's in place. Pretty happy. Let's just duplicate that as many times as we need it. So we're going to need 6 of them. Let's just select it. Go edit. Copy. Or Control C. Then let's go edit paste tool. Okay, and as you remember from the paste tool, you can just click where you want to paste the next copy. About there. Then if you right click, you can paste another one. Okay. Let's paste these two. Let's push return to drop the paste tool. Okay, just make sure that you can sort of notice that they're a little bit too low. I'm going to use this right viewport. They're sort of positioned this way, alright, but they're a little low in comparison to the first pillar. So just line them up. Let's go in here. Yep, a little bit out. Alt key, up arrow, and tap, 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 tap. Zoom in a little closer. Oh, they're a little bit out here as well. So Alt key, Tap the arrow keys and line it up until it's pretty close. Closer the better, of course. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Now, all we need to do now is duplicate these three to this side. So to do that, under multiply, duplicate, we have mirror X, because of course is the X-axis this way. So click mirror X, we're finished. Before we go too much further, let's make sure that we actually give these pillars a surface name. So the surface name for these will obviously be Facade Smooth. If we zoom in closely, we can see this faceted look to our smooth surfaces, to our rounded areas. Let's go Q for change surface. Yep, okay, select Facade Smooth and click OK. Now the first thing you'll notice is that some parts of these pillars are starting to look a little bit funky. There's funny black shading issues and so forth. Now the reason for this is basically what we call a smoothing error, or a surface shading error caused by the surface threshold being too high. And you're probably thinking, what the heck is he talking about? Let's have a look. Let's go Surface Editor and look at Facade Smooth. Now it's got smoothing turned on, but below that we have a thing called the smooth threshold. What the smooth threshold is an angle at which it says any polygon that's connected, anything between 0 and this angle, will be regarded as a smooth surface. So if they're connected up to 89.5 degrees, which is pretty much close to almost a sharp corner, it'll think, well, this should be smooth, and it's attempting to smooth around edges and corners, and it's getting it all wrong because it's just too sharp and it's just not working very well. So to fix this, we simply just drop the smooth threshold to something that we think, well, these smooth areas, I wouldn't say they're sort of greater than maybe 30 degrees between each polygon. So let's try 30 degrees as a smooth threshold. So anything between 0 and 30 degrees should be smooth. Perfect. Look at that. Fixed it instantly for us. These are looking nice and smooth. No more weird surface shading problems. Okay, we could probably maybe we can increase that to 35. Yeah, that still works. Okay, that's pretty good. And of course anything above 35 degrees, such as these corners, stays nice and sharp, so it's not smoothed. Now because the surface is shared by a few things in the facade, such as these round circular details, it's a good idea if you change that just to double check everything else to make sure you don't get any weird polygons that start getting flat or sharp or overly sharp. Now it's not too bad, looks pretty good to me. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. So it looks like that was a good idea. Now if we combine all these parts back together, we're starting to get a pretty decent looking facade with plenty of detail in here. So now that I've named that and I've fixed the smooth threshold, let's go File, Save Incremental. We're almost finished with modeling this facade. Now the last detail I want to add is found right underneath the inset that we've just finished, and that's this ledge that sticks out. There's like a top with two sides, and within this we have like a box which has this sort of like carved in detail, sort of like these slats that run down, and some circular detail in here. Now for the circular detail I'm going to be a little lazy. I'm not going to model something new. I'm going to recycle this big circular detail from the big tiles here and shrink it down and clone it in here. And I'm not going to model in all these slats. Again, I'm going to use texture maps to detail that up. We can use textures to pretty much detail anything we like, including all these lines that are cut into the surface, such as the hanners, the name here, the edges that run around. These could all be done with texture maps. It depends how close you're planning to get to this model. If it's for photoreal work where you're going to be flying really close to it, you'll need to model this in. If it's not, if it's a background element or if it's a piece of scenery that you're going to see from a distance, use texture maps. Anyway, so for now, let's go to a new layer and let's go into this viewport. There it is. And let's start with the box tool. Create, box, start the top corner. Let's drag it out to there, and that represents the ledge that we have. Drop the box tool, like so, and select this polygon. Okay, let's zoom into that a little. Okay, we need to create a ledge that's about this wide. Okay, so to do that, I'm going to go to multiply, bevel, hold down the control key, and click and drag to the left of the mouse, like so. And keep going, maybe 2 or 3 times until the thickness of this outline matches the thickness of the ledge. That looks pretty close to me, so I push the return key to drop the bevel tool. Now the ledge has only got a side and a top, okay, or 2 sides and a top, doesn't have a bottom along it, so I'm going to select this polygon, and I'm actually going to just delete this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to flatten, instead of having this sort of like diagonal sort of edge here, I'm going to take these points here and the ones on the other side, I'm going to flatten them into a straight line, because then I can use this as my ledge, and this polygon in the center, I can use the bevel tool to create this sort of inset inside here. Okay, so what we could do is we could select this and this, okay, and this. Let's zoom in. And a handy trick for flattening things is to use the stretch tool. So modify, stretch, okay, hold down the control key to constrain first. Now this is the trick. Hold down control and place the mouse basically where we want to flatten things to. Like so. We'll say I want to flatten these points, this one and the other two, until they line up here. So place the mouse about here, hold down the control key for constrain, click and drag down. And what happens is with constrain active, no matter how far you drag, the points won't go any further than where the mouse is. They'll flatten to where the mouse cursor was. And then let go. And drop the stretch tool. Nicely lined up, quite clean, quite quick and quite easy. So, we've got this nice looking ledge thing happening here. Let's go back out to our viewports. Okay, let's put the facade in the background. Okay, and I'm going to use T for move, and I'm just going to make sure, or I can use the Alt key if you want to, Alt and arrow keys in the right viewport here. Just tap it, doesn't matter if it's slightly inside, but until it's sort of close to the edge there. It's pretty good. What I need to do is I need to extend that ledge out along the side. So select the 3 polygons around the edge like I've done just there. In fact, don't select anything at the moment. You notice that there's one thing here. If you select all the polygons, they're all facing into the facade that way. Okay, you can tell this by the normals, those dotted lines that point out and say this is the way the polygon's facing. It's facing the wrong way. So what we need to do first is under detail, select all the polygons and select polygons flip, which is just facing the other way. Let's okay, so let's deselect this one. Just keep these 3 around the edge selected, and then we're going to use multiply, multi-shift, hold down control to constrain, click and drag up, just to extend it out a little. Doesn't have to go too far. It's not as deep as the awning, be maybe that, and push the return key, and there's our ledge done. Quick and simple like that. Now this inside detail, okay, I'm going to use the bevel tool because this is only a single polygon. Turn on the bevel tool, hold down control, click and drag up to just bring it out a little like so. Right click or Apple click to create a new bevel, then click and drag to the left like so. Okay, that's pretty good. And then click, or right click I should say, once more to create a new bevel, and then click again and drag down to bring it in just a tiny bit, not too far. I want to make sure that it's sitting outside the facade. Okay, so don't take it back in too far, or it'll cut back into the facade. and push return. And that's that ledge detail finished. The last thing we need, of course, is those circular details. So let's go and, in fact, let's go and just select one of these. Okay. Select all the polygons, go Control C to copy, get a new layer, go Control V to paste. Okay, there it is there. And let's just move it down here and shrink it. So T for move, down here. Okay, Shift H for size. Okay, so modify size, not H for stretch. Use size. What size will do, it'll size the whole lot uniformly. So go into the middle of it, click and drag down. That looks pretty close. Maybe a little bit further. T for move. I'll move it maybe should be about there. Okay, and just size it and position it so it matches as closely as possible. Does it be perfect? Okay, so there we go. Just make sure. Okay, put the other layer in the background, and we'll notice that it's sitting behind it. So T for move. Let's move it. Oops, not up. Move it forward so it sits in front. In fact, what we could do is use H for stretch, and in this right view we could thicken it out a little, like that. Looks pretty good to me. Okay, so there it goes. That's pretty close. Now there are actually 6 of these as well, and if you look carefully, they actually sit directly under each pillar. So I'm going to select it, edit, copy, edit, paste tool, and I'm going to click one here and one about here. Okay, remove to right click to do a new post, like so, and drop the paste tool. And let's just double check that everything looks lined up nice and tidy, because usually with the paste tool they don't always perfectly look the same. They don't all perfectly line up. So okay, let's select these two. Notice that no, they don't line up. So T for move, of course, is always the Alt and arrow key. They're not too bad. They're pretty close. Okay, happy with that. The last thing we need to do, of course, is to use multiply mirror X. And there's the other side. Done. So we don't need to name these polygons because they're already using facade smooth, because they were copied already from an existing object. But this one here, let's go Q to name surface and call this facade flat because it's quite sharp. And we're done. If we put all these together, I'm happy to say that we're pretty much finished with our facade. So if you got to this stage and it looks pretty cool, then give yourself a pat on the back. Don't forget to go File, Save Incremental. In this video I'm just going to show you how you can actually cut those extra grooves into the actual physical model to give it a little touch of photorealism in here. Now what I'm talking about, if we go to a new layer and we'll bring up this back layer as full screen, are these sort of grooves. They're actually cut into the stone of the facade, and it's got one at the top here that goes around. Okay, it's got one here and there. Under here we've got something go up and across. We've also got one that runs under the awning section here, and a couple of box-like shapes that cut around as well. Now you remember how we did the these panels here? We used the drill tool. So we drew the shapes and we cut them into the facade. So if we can come in here and make some grooves or some very thin polygons like an outline and cut that in the facade, we should be able to shift that in with either bevel or multi-shift to actually embed them into the actual facade, giving it more photoreal quality. So let's start by using the Create pen tool, and I'm going to start with this line here and go up to the top. Now you notice the first thing I don't do is I don't stop and draw out here as well. It's because if you look at this side, the line is straight, and this side it's not, because like I said, this photograph is taken on a bit of a perspective angle, so the perspective correction isn't guaranteed to make it look exactly right. So I'm going to go by sort of a bit of an artistic license on this one and say it should be straight. Draw one to there, one to there, one to there. Straighten them up. Oops. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do half of this, because sometimes it's easier to just make half first and then mirror it across, like we did with the awning. Okay, rather than trying to draw the whole thing. And because the picture isn't exactly perfect either. Okay, so drop the pen tool. I'm going to go multiply, knife tool. What I want to do is I want to cut a line across here where this next groove is, and there's one across here as well. So hold down the control key to constrain or lock the knife into a straight line. Whoops. And cut across like that. Now it's not quite lined up, so let's left click. Okay, move it in place. Looks pretty good. And to make another one, we can just right click, or if you're on a Mac, you can Apple click here. Whoops, make sure it cuts right across as well. And drop the knife tool. So those bits are done. Now you notice that this one doesn't quite go through all the way down, and it sort of ends at the awning, and this one comes up and it sort of carries on underneath the awning like this. So we need this line to be cut through as well. Now that's not as easy as it sounds. We can't just pull out the knife tool. Well, we could like cut a bit in. Okay, then we could like drop the knife tool, and then we could cut a bit up, and then we'd have to clean all this up. Okay, knife tool's not a good tool for cutting a shape like this into the polygon. Instead, we're going to use the same approach we used for doing these tiles down here, and that's using the drill tool. So let's go to the next empty layer, and let's use the pen tool again. Let's go pen. Start out here and go across. So it goes to here, and then up, and then here, and then up. Oops. And then go out to the edge. Can go right up to the top here and here, because we're making a polygon after all. So we can't just stop here. It's not going to make a line, it's going to make a whole polygon. And of course this is outside this area, so it won't really matter what shape this is out here. We just care about this line at the bottom. And we can just adjust that until we're happy with the shape. Maybe pull this one up a little. This up a little. I'm pretty happy with that. Push return to drop that pen tool. Okay, let's go and place this other layer in the foreground. Place that layer we just drew in the background, and use construct, drill. Make sure the drill axis is Z, which is cutting straight perpendicular, in a straight line perpendicular to the viewport here, and slice of course, so it cuts or slices through the polygons, and click OK. And there it is. Pretty good. Okay, we can delete that. Go back in here. Okay, let's combine a few polygons in here. So these two should be a single polygon, because what's going to happen if we use these edges of polygons as outlines, we don't really want that a line that cuts across like that. So we need to get rid of it. Easiest way is to combine these two polygons into a single polygon. To do that, all I need to do is select them, go detail, and where it has polygons, the first option, merge polys, or shift Z on the keyboard. We'll combine those together and deselect it. Now we can get rid of this extra point here. We don't really need that on the side of the polygon. So that's mostly done. Okay, so let's go and actually mirror this across so we get the whole facade done. So under the multiply tab, let's click on mirror X, which will mirror it across the center. Okay. Now, if you recall, lucky for us, we modeled this on perfect 0. If yours gets mirrored and you lasso these points and it doesn't say 4, if it says more, then it could be that the points down here aren't exactly at 0 when you did the mirror. So what you could do, if that was the case, so let's pretend that none of these points were right. You go to detail, set value for all the points in the center, and make sure X was 0, and that would just zero them out for you. And then what you could do is you could do a merge points option here under detail as well, or M, and it would connect them together if there's like 8 points here. Anyway, Now we don't want a line down the center because we don't have like a groove running down the middle of our sculpture here, so I'm going to go through and select these two polygons and use that merge polys tool. These two polygons and these two polygons, using the keyboard shortcut there, of course, which is why it's much quicker to do if you remember the keyboard shortcuts. These points and this point can all be deleted because it's just extra points on the line. This one don't delete because of course it needs it because it's that shape. Okay, so we're pretty much almost done. So let's select all these polygons. Should be 5 polygons. And let's create little thin edges so that we can actually use them for cutting out the grooves. At the moment they're just lines, so if we were to cut these into the facade, we're just lines on the polygons. We'd be able to actually do anything with them. So let's have a look. Let's go to multiply, and let's go bevel. Come zoom in so I can see, because they're going to be quite thin lines. Hold down Control key, and let's click and drag to the left. Okay, just to create a bevel on each polygon. You notice got this nice thin groove thing happening now. Pretty happy with that. Okay, let's get in for numeric on that. Okay, 5mm, that's pretty good. Okay, if it gets too thick, then use the numeric options for bevel, and you can adjust the value in here to get the width you're after. I'd say make it about 5 is pretty good, and push return. Okay, now the interesting thing about bevel is once you beveled it, the polygons are still selected. That's why I selected the polygons first, and they're inside these edges, so all we need to do is simply select them and delete them, and what that'll do is it'll leave those edges behind. And these are the edges we're going to use for basically cutting the grooves into the facade. Nice. Now the only thing you have to be careful of when you've done this whole bevel thing is that these edges are going to be a lot thinner than these, and the reason for that is that this edge here is built up of the bevel of 2 polygons, so it's 10mm thick, whereas this is only 5 because it was from one single polygon. Okay, there's no polygon on the other side, so there's not another beveled edge there to double the thickness. So we need to just adjust these outer edges so they're the same thickness as these edges. Let's go and do that. I'm going to go into this viewport for that. So we could move this edge out this way a bit, or this edge in, I don't know which is going to be the easiest. In fact, let's move the inner edge. So this one, this one, this one, and this one. No, I'm selecting the edges. I'm in edge selection mode. They're going to move this way, but let's say at the same time we might as well get this edge as well, because this also needs to be thickened. Now we're not going to do the other side, otherwise I'll move in the wrong direction. So what we'll do is we'll actually deselect them. You're probably thinking, what am I doing? Well, because it's symmetrical, I can use this tool down here called symmetry. And what symmetry does is it works on the x-axis. And it says if I do something on this side, like select these edges, if there are edges at exactly the same location on the opposite side of the x-axis, I'll select those. Okay, see this? And because I'm working in symmetry mode, and because it's symmetrical, and because I'm going to be moving things this way, okay, if I do it in symmetry mode with symmetry turned on, it means I don't have to come over and do these ones individually later on. It'll do them all at the same time. So whatever I do on this side is mirrored on this side. So let's go back and let's do that whole selection thing again. This one. Okay, shift and click on these edges, this edge and this edge and this edge. Okay. See, select them all on this side. Now, tools always work in the right direction on this side. Okay, on the positive side of X. So if we went move and clicked and dragged this way, it would move this way. So one thing to note, that if you're working on the negative X axis, you can tell minus X is here on the corner of the line, and we said move and we drag the mouse that way, it would work in the opposite direction. So it can be a little confusing. Now all we need to do is we need to move the edges another 5mm. We know that because 5mm bevel means these will be 10mm thick, these are 5mm thick. Easy. So the easiest way to do that is to go modify, and we'll go move. Let's go numeric, and let's go offset. 5mm. Apply. Okay, wrong way. So if it gets thinner, we've moved the wrong way. So minus 10mm. So we need to bring it back 5mm and then 5mm again. So done. Push the return key to drop the move tool. That was easy. Okay, we also need to select these edges as well and move these down 5mm. So minus 5 on Y. Move. Numeric. Okay, X should be 0. Y should be minus 5mm. And click apply. We're done. Drop the move tool. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. We can come and turn off symmetry mode for a while. Symmetry mode's cool, but it can cause some tools to not work correctly, so take care when using it. There are a few things I want to fix in here before I go too far. One is I want to stop some of these lines from going or being cut into the facade when they don't need to. For instance, this line doesn't need to be cut in because it's underneath everything, so that we can delete this polygon. Also, okay, here, this line cuts across, but we don't have to cut through under the awning here and across into here. So I'm going to use the knife tool, multiply, knife, and let's just cut there. Select all these polygons and delete them. Same here, use the knife tool. Let's cut across there. Okay, select that and delete that as well, because I don't want it cutting down under the awning and down further. Now to flatten this off, I'll select this point here, these 2 points, H for stretch. If we hold down the control key to constrain the tool, now remember how we use this to flatten things out, control, position the mouse on the line, hold down control and drag to the left. So let me just line it up. Drag to the left. When the control key is held down and it's constrained, the points will line up. They won't go any further than when the cursor was placed. Okay, so that's nice and flat. Let's have a look here too. Okay, this here could be a bit tricky because you notice that it's broken here. It's where these 2 points joined in. So what I need to do is I need to take this point and this point, line them up at the corner here, and then connect them together. So let's take this point, go H for stretch, position the cursor roughly about where that point is, hold down the control key to constrain, click and drag the mouse down. Okay. Let's take the other point that we have here. Let's unselect this one, take this point, use H for stretch, go to where this line is, hold down the control key and click and drag to the left to flatten that point to this line. Now once these points are lined up, select them both. Okay, now just click and drag over them. You notice that it should say here cell 2, selected 2, and what we'll do is combine them together or join them together. So we can do that by going out of the detail tab and clicking weld. Okay, let's say 2 points welded. And what weld does is just attaches points together. What it tends to do, you can have as many points as you like, but what it tends to do is it welds all the points to the last selected point. So the order that you select the points in is quite important. Okay, so I need to do the same for the other side, but what I could do instead, just because I'm lazy and because it's faster to do it this way than it is to go through and repeat all the steps, is use that knife tool, multiply knife, Shift K is a keyboard shortcut, hold down control, cut it down the center, then go polygon selection mode, delete all these polygons. Now we'll just make sure that all these points are at 0, so let's select all the points in the center like that, go V for set value, X, 0, okay, and then under multiply we'll click on the mirror X button, and that'll just make sure that these are mirrored across, and it's looking pretty good. So I'm pretty happy with that. The last thing I want to do is just make these square grooves. Okay. Now the pitch is probably a little off here because these should be sort of in the middle between these two grooves here. So let's have a look. Let's get a new layer. Okay, put this in the background layer. Sorry, new layer, background layer. Create, box tool, and I'm going to drag out a box. As close as I can to the picture. Okay, zoom into that a bit. I think that's going to be alright. I think the edge goes to that edge there. Okay, this could probably come down just a little. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to select this polygon, and I'm going to go to the bevel tool. Infinumeric. It's going to be 10 millimeters because that's how thick those grooves are. And push return to drop the bevel tool. Now this polygon is still selected, so let's just delete it to leave the outline behind. And there it is. Now we need another one on the other side, so I'll just use the Mirror X tool to do that. And there you have it. There's our two sets of grooves. In fact, we can probably take both of these. Let's just make sure they're sort of centered between here and here. It looks like it's a bit further apart. Okay, I'm not going to use the picture too much now because the picture is sort of close. It's been more my guide than anything else. And I'm going to do it by eye just to make sure the spacing around the outside here looks about right. I'm going to take this one, I'm going to line this up with the edge of that. So I'm going to use that old trick of using the Alt or the Option key and the arrow key here to do that, to knock it in. So Alt and the left arrow key. Let's take this one. Let's delete it. And rather than redo that other side in typical efficient process format, I'm going to select that and go Mirror X again. Pretty happy with that. And we're done. Okay. Now these two layers can probably be combined together. So the easiest way to do that is under the View tab, Layers, More, Flatten Layers, which will combine the selected layers into a single layer. Okay, so we're done. Let's go and cut that into our actual facade itself. So we'll do that in the next video. After modeling all the grooves to cut into the surface to add this realism to my object, I'm ready to go and actually cut them into the facade itself. So the facade is in layer 1. Okay, let's turn it to a texture wire so we can see the wireframes as well as the polygons. Okay, now the problem with the tool I'm about to use, which is the drill tool, if you remember we used the drill tool to cut these panels in, basically we'll cut through the entire object if I don't tell it where to cut. Now I want to cut the grooves into the front here. If I don't select the front, it's going to cut through the entire object. Now here I'm going to end up with these grooves cut into the back as well. So to prevent that, let's get a polygon selection mode and pick that front polygon. Once that's selected, let's go and place the grooves in the background layer, like so. And then under Construct, let's click on Drill. Okay. I'm going to use this tool, the Stencil tool. And what the Stencil tool does is it's like the Slice tool. The only difference is that it'll actually name the polygons that it cuts into the surface. I'm going to call these polygons grooves. Okay, you notice I've already done it once here in the past, so what you need to do is type in the word grooves here and make sure the axis is Z because it's cutting through the Z axis, and click OK, and there it is. Okay, so let's click on the front layer. We don't need the background layer now, and there's the grooves cut in and ready to be actually embedded into the surface. That is, we need to bring these back in to create the grooves. At the moment they're just flat cuts on the surface. So we turn this to texture, you notice that it doesn't look any different. There's no grooves in that yet. Okay, texture wire, so see the edges of the wire frames. Now we can see they're there. We just need to do something with them. So we're going to have to pick these. Picking them probably isn't too hard, but by naming them with a surface name such as grooves, we can use a tool called the Statistics panel to pick the polygon. So let's go Statistics, which is W on the keyboard. And what the Statistics panel is, it's a way of picking certain polygons or points based on certain rules or criteria. In this case, we have like the stats for the model. It's got a total of 189 polygons, 189 faces. Faces are just another name for polygons. What we've got here is some of these are grayed out, so they're not available. Unless they have 0, so they're grey. And here we've got some polygons with more than 4 vertices and some with 4 vertices. To pick anything in here, we simply click on the plus next to it, and it'll be highlighted like so. To deselect, we click the minus. Okay. Now the beauty about this is that we can go to this section that says surf, click on it, and a drop-down list appears, and it says you have 2 surfaces in this object. One's called facade flat and one's called grooves. Let's click the grooves, and then let's click the plus next to that, and that will select just those polygons, meaning that we've got them selected ready to embed or groove into the surface. Now once we've done that, because there's a whole pile of different polygons, some of them have like a cut through it, we could probably use the bevel tool in here, but just to be safe I'm going to use multiply, multi-shift, and I'm going to hold down the control key and go and click and drag down to drag it into the surface, and we're done. Just a little way, we don't need to go too far, and push return, and there are our grooves cut in and ready to go. If we turn off texture wire, we can actually see these in here. It's pretty cool. Okay, we'll add all the other bits. And I'd say we've got a pretty good looking copy of the Hannah's facade, other than of course the logo, but I'm not going to be too worried about that. So at this point, let's go this last layer. Let's go Shift S just to save that as an incremental, and let's delete it as Shift S again just to save it again without that extra layer in. Now I'd say we're pretty well finished in this respect. Possibly we need to go and select, hold on a sec, let's go. We still have surface called grooves. Okay, let's click plus and select those. Let's go Q, or click the surfaces panel, and let's just name these polygons facade flat, because we don't need a third texture naming because we're going to be using the same surface as the rest of the facade. And save this. Let's look at a way that we can take our facade and just show it off by rendering a really nice, what we call a clay style render. Now to do that, of course we're going to need our model in here first. Load, object, facade, latest version. Okay, this version is simply the model we finished in the last video, but I've flattened it to a single layer to make it easy to manage. I'm going to switch it to camera view, and of course what we need is some kind of an interesting camera angle. Never ever sort of just use defaults in Lightwave. That's the easiest way of getting images that look amateur and also uninteresting most of the time. Okay, so here's the facade. I'm going to move it down, angle the camera up, and if I right click or Apple click if you're on a Mac, you can bank the camera a little. That's quite interesting, I suppose. Okay, move it back, rotate. Okay, something a bit more interesting than just flat on. Okay, the nice thing about having coming from a side, you get these nice lines that lead the viewer's eye. Okay, so I'm going to say that's pretty cool. Something else I can do with the camera is I can add a bit of depth of field to make it focus on a particular area of the object. So let's go to a top view. Let's turn on texture wireframe, or front face wireframe, sorry, just so we can see all the detail inside here. Properties of the camera, and let's change it to 9 pass anti-alias, and turn on depth of field. Now when you have depth of field turned on, you get this dotted line, or dotted circle I should say, around the camera that shows us where the focus point is. And this is the focal distance, or at the point at which everything is in focus. So use this dotted circle click on the mini slide next to focal distance. Let's focus on the middle of it, on this middle tile here. Okay, switch this back to camera view. We're not sure what it's going to do, but what we can do is under the render tab, we can click on MB preview, or Shift F9 as a keyboard shortcut. And what that'll do is it'll generate a depth of field preview in the OpenGL viewport here. Now, it's working. It's a little bit blurry here. Let's crank up the blurriness of that by dropping the f-stop to 2. Okay, that's not too bad. We don't want an extreme amount of depth of field in here, but I'm going to push it up a bit further. Lens f-stop of 1. It's getting pretty strong, maybe 1.5. So I've at least got a bit of depth of field in here, just to add a bit of interest to the shot. Always looks a bit prettier with a bit of depth of field in. Okay, so you can see the middle is in focus. There's a little out of focus, a little out of focus there. I'm pretty happy with that. You can do a quick F9 to just check that. Okay, let's go to 9-pass anti-alias render. Okay, something that's not quite right here, of course, is obviously that the lighting really sort of sucks. And it looks pretty ugly because it's all flat grey and there's no real shading or shadowing or anything else happening in here, so that's pretty cool. I like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a system called global illumination, which is basically, rather than using a light source, which is what we call a local illumination model, where all the light is coming from a particular point in a straight line towards the surface, I'm going to use global illumination, which means light from everywhere, or light from the environment around it. What happens when we have light like this is it generates all these sort of soft shadows, and you get like shading where the light can't penetrate, where it's hidden from the light around, and you get soft shading and soft shadows and edges, and crevices have shadows and shading in them, and it looks very pretty and very nice, and is a good way of showing off your 3D models. So let's see how we set that up. Well, the first thing we do is we click on lights, go properties, and we turn this light off completely. We don't want a main source of light. What we want to do is we're going to add in a global light. So to turn it off, we just deactivate all the effect options. To activate the global lighting, we simply click on Render Globals. And under here we have tabs at the bottom, 5 tabs. The middle one, Global Illum, stands for Global Illumination. And this generates what we call radiosity type lighting. It basically scans the scene for light that's bouncing off surfaces or coming from the environment and uses that to light the scene. It's a much more realistic lighting model, but like anything that makes things look cooler, it does take extra time to render. So I'm going to enable it anyway, and I'm going to change type from Monte Carlo, which basically is a lighting system that collects lighting from everything, including surfaces and other objects, as well as the background, to just say backdrop only. So I only want to use the backdrop color or the background environment as the lighting source. Raise per valuation is the quality setting. Now 4x12 is pretty good. I usually knock mine down to maybe, well, let's knock it down to 2x6 for now, just so we can test this, see what it's going to do. Or 1x3. Now the lower this gets, the grainier and lower quality it looks. So 1x3 we're not going to actually use for a final render, but it's a good way of actually showing you what this is going to do. Okay, if I do an F9 now, first thing you notice is nothing is happening. Well, it's pretty dark anyway, and that's because the environment obviously is black, the default color. So we need to change the environment to something lighter, such as white. For that we go Windows, Backdrop Options, or Control F5 if you want the keyboard shortcut for that, and we say Backdrop Color. If we right click on the color swatch or Apple click, we can drag inside the color swatch and make it brighter by dragging it left and right. Quickest way to change it to white. Now that it's white, let's do another F9, and look at that. Now it's using the white surrounding the object as the light source, and you can already see sort of roughly, even though it's quite grainy, you can see that it's giving us quite a nice sort of soft shading sort of effect. This is often termed what we call clay rendering, because it looks like a piece of clay or a clay sculpture. A lot of people use this for showing off detailed models. So let's cancel that for now, and what we'll do is we'll go to cameras, and what I want to do here is I want to change the camera type from classic camera to one called perspective camera. Now, the difference between classic camera and perspective camera is really just the way that they render the final image. Both cameras work identically, except one camera renders the image by analyzing all the objects and the depth they're at from the camera and rendering polygons and then covering them with other polygons. That's the classic camera. Perspective camera is what we call a ray trace camera. What it does is it renders the scene starting at the top of the picture and renders down line by line. And often when you've got things that have radiosity or reflection or transparency, this can actually render a lot faster than the classic camera. So if you've got anything that's quite complex, try both the perspective and classic and see which one is going to work the best for you. Now, it's not always true that perspective is faster, but in most cases where it's like this kind of a scene, it may be faster. So I'm going to also set this to 50% so I can do a quick test render. And then I'm going to go back to my render globals and I'm going to knock my race pervasion to maybe 3x9. 3x9 is pretty good. And push F9 and we'll do a quick test render, see how that looks. Notice how the perspective camera is rendering from the top down. Okay, it's going to do a few passes to that depth of field. Now what I might do is I might just pause that. The last image took 21 seconds, so let's see how long this one will take. Wasn't too bad, it's almost double, but the last picture was twice as large. So this is a half size picture, it took twice as long. So okay, that's not looking too bad. That's pretty good. So once you're happy with that, make sure you go File, Save Scene. Let's call this Facade Clay Style or something. And set your camera render properties. In fact, let's set it to 800 by 600, make it a nice big one, and knock up the anti-alias level to maybe 17 just to smooth it even further, and render away.